If you think Real Madrid is actually planning to hire Jose Mourinho for his modern tactical genius, you are completely missing the point. Florentino Perez doesn't want Mourinho the manager. He wants Mourinho the executioner. Let me paint a picture for you. The scoreboard flashes 2-0. The opposition is dictating the tempo, cutting through the midfield with embarrassing ease. On the pitch, the most expensive assembly of footballing talent in the world is wandering around like they are wearing concrete boots. You look at their body language. There is no urgency in the pressing. There is no anger in their eyes. There is no desperate sprint to cover a teammate's mistake. There is only a deafening, arrogant sense of entitlement. They are waiting for the game to magically fix itself. And exactly at that moment, in the 35th minute of this unfolding disaster, Kylian Mbappé is not suffering with them. He is in the gym. He picks up his phone and posts a photo to millions of followers. In it, he is working out, and he is smiling. A subtle, cryptic, perfectly timed smile. That is not a coincidence. That is a political statement. Mbappé is a brilliant footballer, but he is arguably an even more brilliant politician of the modern game. He knows exactly what the prevailing narrative has been over the last few weeks. He knows the local press has been aggressively whispering that Real Madrid somehow plays a more balanced, fluid game without him. The media had painted him as the tactical bottleneck ruining Carlo Ancelotti's system. So, when the team completely and utterly collapses in his absence, that gym photo is his brutal, silent answer. He didn't have to say a single word to dismantle the criticism. The silence was deafening, and the smile was lethal. It was a message sent directly to the tactical drawing board. Look at your system now. But this video isn't just about Kylian Mbappe's social media warfare. It is about a dressing room that has fundamentally stopped functioning, and a hierarchy that is preparing to take drastic measures. To fully grasp what is happening at the Santiago Bernabeu right now, you have to understand the trap of unprecedented, historic success. When you have 15 Champions League trophies sitting securely in the cabinet, the badge stops being a source of immense pressure and slowly starts becoming a comfortable blanket. The players step onto the grass expecting the sheer aura of the white shirt to intimidate the opposition into submission. They have become so deeply accustomed to late-game miracles, to those magical Bernabeu nights where logic goes out the window, that they have forgotten the grueling, unglamorous, blue-collar groundwork required to actually control a football match for 90 minutes. Carlo Ancelotti is an absolute legend of the sport. His man-management style, his famous vibes, his iconic raised eyebrow, these are the trusted tools of a father figure who trusts his superstars to figure it out on their own. It is a philosophy built on profound mutual respect, emotional intelligence, and individual brilliance. But vibe management has a strict expiration date. It works brilliantly when your squad is starving for success, when undisputed leaders are there to set the daily tempo, and when the dressing room ruthlessly polices itself. But when the vibe dies, it dies completely. When players start putting their brand above the collective, when defensive tracking back becomes an optional suggestion rather than a mandatory requirement, Ancelotti's soft touch suddenly looks like a terrifying loss of control. The father figure is no longer respected. He is simply being taken advantage of by egos that have grown larger than the stadium itself. This is not a mere transition period. This is not just a dip in form. This is an institutional failure of discipline. And this is exactly why the atmosphere around the club has violently shifted in recent days. This is why, out of absolutely nowhere, the dark, looming shadow of a certain Portuguese manager has been cast over the Spanish capital. The media is talking about formations. They are passionately debating whether Mbappé can play as a traditional number 9, or if Jude Bellingham needs to drop deeper into the midfield to cover the gaps. They are obsessed with injuries, expected goals, and passing networks. But the real story isn't happening on the whiteboard. It's a political war happening in the press, and nobody is looking at the weapon being used. In the span of 48 hours, almost every major sports outlet in Europe suddenly found themselves discussing the exact same hypothetical scenario. Jose Mourinho returning to the Santiago Bernabeu to replace Carlo Ancelotti mid-season. Now, if you understand how modern football media works, you know that this level of synchronized reporting does not happen by accident. It is not a spontaneous wave of journalistic intuition. When the most connected reporters simultaneously start floating the name of an unemployed, highly polarizing manager during a club's crisis, it is because someone very high up the food chain wants that name in the public consciousness. That is not a transfer rumor. That is a calculated leak. And this is where we have to be ruthlessly honest about the footballing reality. Florentino Perez and the Real Madrid board are some of the smartest, most analytical minds in the sport. They watch the same games we do. They know perfectly well that the tactical landscape of European football has evolved since 2012. They know that Jose Mourinho's recent managerial stints at Tottenham and AS Roma, while containing moments of undeniable cup magic, did not feature the kind of suffocating, dominant, progressive football that the modern Bernabeu demands. If they were purely looking for a tactical genius to unlock Kylian Mbappe's movement or fine-tune a high press, Mourinho would not be at the top of their shortlist. But they are not looking for a tactician. They are looking for a weapon of mass psychological destruction. Let's break down the logic here. When a dressing room stops fighting, it is usually because the fear of consequences has completely vanished. Under Carlo Ancelotti, life is good. The players are respected, they are treated like adults, and their mistakes are often shielded from the press by a manager who will take the bullet for them in every single post-match interview. But human nature, especially the nature of multi-millionaire athletes who have already conquered Europe, dictates that comfort eventually breeds complacency. When you know your manager isn't going to publicly humiliate you, bench you, or strip you of your privileges, that extra sprint in the 89th minute suddenly feels a lot less necessary. This is the trap of player power. The superstars start believing that they are untouchable. They start believing that their commercial value to the club guarantees their starting position, regardless of their work rate off the ball. So, how does a president instantly shatter that illusion without actually firing the beloved manager? You introduce the shadow of the executioner. By leaking the Mourinho rumor, the board is sending a terrifying, undeniable message to the dressing room. Mourinho is the antithesis of the modern player empowerment era. He does not care about your Instagram followers. He does not care how much your transfer fee was. He does not care if you won the Ballon d'Or, or if your mother is your agent. If you do not track back, if you do not follow his exact defensive instructions, he will drop you. He will publicly humiliate you in the press conference. He will wage a psychological war against you until you either submit to his system or demand a transfer. He is the ultimate stress test for an arrogant squad. The mere whisper of his name in the corridors of Valdebebas is designed to trigger a very specific emotion: absolute, unfiltered anxiety. It is a warning shot fired directly at the egos of the Galacticos. The board is essentially telling them, "You think Ancelotti's system is the problem? Keep walking around the pitch. Keep smiling in the gym when we are losing. See what happens when we bring in the one man who will happily bench you for a 19-year-old academy player who is actually willing to bleed for the badge." Nobody is talking about the psychological brilliance of this move. They are debating if Mourinho's defensive block can work in La Liga. But the truth is, the board doesn't even need him to sign a contract to get a reaction. The ghost of Mourinho is already doing the heavy lifting. To truly understand the brilliance of Florentino Perez's psychological warfare, we need to rewind the clock. We need to look at the exact pattern of how this club operates when the dressing room slips out of the board's control. Now, a lot of younger fans might look at this Mourinho rumor as a fresh, unprecedented threat. The older generation might view it as a desperate grasp at nostalgia. But nobody is talking about the fact that we have seen this exact movie before, and it ended in a masterclass of board-level manipulation. Take yourself back to 2019. Real Madrid was in absolute freefall. Cristiano Ronaldo had departed for Juventus. Zinedine Zidane had stepped down, citing a team that needed a new voice. Julen Lopetegui had come and gone in a disastrous blink of an eye, and Santiago Solari was desperately trying to manage a squad that looked entirely devoid of motivation. The superstars of that era were sleepwalking. They had won 3 consecutive Champions League titles, and exactly like the current squad, the baseline hunger was completely gone. Player power was at an all-time high, and the collective effort on the pitch was at an all-time low. And what happened next? Right at the peak of that crisis, when the players seemed completely indifferent to whoever was standing in the technical area, the Spanish press suddenly exploded with a unified, inescapable narrative. Jose Mourinho was packing his bags. He was coming back to Madrid to clean house. What followed was one of the most fascinating psychological shifts in modern football history. The impending arrival of the Portuguese manager sent a shockwave of genuine panic through the Valdebebas training complex. The veteran players, the ones who had survived Mourinho's first exhausting, hyper-intense reign from 2010 to 2013, knew exactly what his return would mean. It meant grueling defensive drills. It meant public criticism in the press. It meant the absolute destruction of their comfortable, insulated routines. The butterfly effect was immediate. The dressing room, previously fractured and lazy, suddenly found a common enemy. Or rather, a common fear. They started running again. The intensity in training spiked overnight. They weren't necessarily fighting for the badge, and they certainly weren't fighting for Solari. They were fighting to prove to the board that the situation wasn't desperate enough to require the nuclear option. They were playing purely for self-preservation. That is not a tactical turnaround. That is a survival mechanism. Florentino Perez didn't actually hire Mourinho that year. He eventually brought Zidane back to restore the peace. But the threat of Mourinho had done its job perfectly. It was the ultimate leverage used to wake up a sleeping giant. Fast forward to today, 7 years later, and the cycle is repeating itself with chilling precision. The board looks at Kylian Mbappe's cryptic gym photos. They look at the casual jogging of the midfield. And they realize the vibe era of Carlo Ancelotti is rapidly losing its grip. So, Perez reaches under the emergency glass and presses the exact same panic button. This isn't just a rumor. It is a meticulously recycled strategy. By invoking the ghost of Bernabeu's past, the hierarchy is speaking directly to every demographic in that modern dressing room. The younger players, who have only heard the myths of Mourinho's ruthless siege mentality, are suddenly terrified of losing their freedom. The established superstars are sharply reminded that their legendary status will not save them from a manager who famously benched Iker Casillas at his peak. The message from the upper management is crystal clear. Either you fix this mess yourselves and start bleeding for Ancelotti, or we will bring in the man who will make you wish you had. Now, whenever a managerial rumor of this magnitude breaks, we have to look at it from multiple angles. There is a completely valid version of this story. The generous reading where the board genuinely believes Jose Mourinho's famous siege mentality is exactly what this broken defense needs. You look at the lack of tracking back, the structural vulnerability on the counterattack, and you might conclude that a defensive pragmatist is the logical sporting solution to stop the bleeding on the pitch. But the less generous reading, and frankly, the far more realistic one, is that Florentino Perez is completely prepared to burn this current dressing room dynamic to the ground in order to rebuild its discipline. This is where we witness a fascinating, terrifying clash of footballing eras. On one side, you have Kylian Mbappe and the modern Galacticos. This is a generation of athletes that wields unprecedented power. They are entire economies unto themselves. They don't need to shout in the dressing room or throw boots at the wall to stage a coup. They just need to post a cryptic workout photo with a subtle smile at the exact moment their team is losing 2-0. They use digital silence and their massive global followings to dictate club policy. They operate under the assumption that they are the untouchable assets, the irreplaceable core of the commercial brand, and that the manager is simply a replaceable contractor. On the other side, you have the philosophy of Jose Mourinho. Mourinho does not negotiate with player power. He actively destroys it. Throughout his entire career, his fundamental rule has been absolute subordination to the collective system. It doesn't matter what your transfer fee was. It doesn't matter if you are viewed as the heir to the Ballon d'Or. If you step out of line, if you prioritize your individual image over the tactical blueprint, he will isolate you. He will strip away your privileges, expose your flaws to the media without hesitation, and leave you on the bench. This is the ultimate paradox of the current situation at the Bernabeu. Real Madrid is an institution that naturally blends glorious chaos with historic success. They can look absolutely disjointed for 85 minutes and still pull a miraculous victory out of nowhere. Because of that, you can never truly bury them. But this current chaos feels fundamentally different. It does not follow the usual logic of a mid-season tactical slump. It is a profound test of authority. The modern player believes the manager is expendable. The board, by letting the Mourinho rumors run wild, is reminding the players that they are the ones who can be disciplined. It is a psychological game of chicken, played at the highest possible stakes. With the legacy of the dressing room hanging in the balance, we are now entering a critical, highly volatile phase of the season. The trap has been set by the upper management, and the next few weeks will reveal exactly who holds the real power at the Santiago Bernabeu. Think about the psychological map of this dressing room right now. Every time these players step onto the pitch, they aren't just playing against the opposition anymore. They are playing against the looming threat of their own discipline. Because of this calculated leak, one of two things is going to happen, and both scenarios are absolutely fascinating for the future of the club. Scenario A. The survival instinct kicks in. The sheer terror of Jose Mourinho's shadow forces this Galactico squad to abandon their individual egos. Kylian Mbappe stops posting cryptic gym photos and starts relentlessly pressing the opposition center-backs. The midfield stops jogging and starts sprinting. They will suddenly start playing like their careers depend on it, desperately trying to save Carlo Ancelotti's job not out of tactical loyalty to the Italian manager, but out of absolute self-preservation. They will fight to keep their freedom. Scenario B is the nuclear option. The bluff doesn't work. The modern player power proves to be too deeply entrenched, the collective arrogance too thick to penetrate. The dressing room calls Florentino Perez's bluff, continuing to drop points and walk around the pitch. If that happens, the president will be forced to actually pull the trigger. He will bring the ultimate enforcer back to the Spanish capital, knowingly initiating a civil war that will end with some of the biggest names in world football being publicly humiliated and permanently exiled to the bench. I have watched the politics of this club for years, man, and this power struggle is as cutthroat as it gets. But I need to hear your read on this situation. Tell me in the comments what you actually think. Is the board just bluffing with these Mourinho leaks to scare the dressing room into waking up? Or does this current Real Madrid squad genuinely need the special one to come in and ruthlessly destroy their egos? Come back to this video when the winter break arrives, because by then, the dust will have settled, and we will know exactly who won this psychological war, the superstars or the institution. If this kind of analysis is what you come here for, if you want to look past the scorelines and understand the dressing room politics that actually dictate the modern game, hit subscribe. We don't just watch the matches here, we read the room. I'll see you in the next one.